Good evening, everyone. My name is Edwina King, and I am the current social media manager for the Metro Detroit National Panhellenic Council. I am very, very honored today to introduce to some, or to present to some and introduce to others, none other than Miss Lucy H. Maddox. Miss Lucy, as I lovingly refer to her, is very special, not only in light of her relationship to Dr. King. She's also someone who I get to lovingly call Sands as a member of 103 Elements of Distinction. We were both initiated through Detroit alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated in spring 2019. And she is not only just an awesome, awesome woman of God, but more importantly, she's very, very important in terms of civil rights. And she also has the distinct pleasure of being connected to Dr. King through being his secretary. And so, again, I would like to formally present to some and introduce to others, not other than Miss Lucy H. Maddox. Hi, Sands. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And so just want to get a brief background. If you could, introduce us and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and reared in Birmingham, Alabama. Was one of six children reared by a single mother. And during that time, you didn't have all the agencies to give you uh, substances, food, and clothing for your children. So my mother, who only had a third grade education, she was born in Selma. So she said the only time they went to school was when it was raining and they couldn't work in the fields. She said they would put the little heads together and pray for rain so they could go to school. And she said, but she remembered getting to the third grade. So my mother did not have an education. So what she did to raise us, she ironed clothing in the white folk homes. And she would get $3 a day in car fare. When I talk to kids during Black History Month at the schools, they always ask me what was car fare. And I have to explain to them that we haven't always had these big motor coach buses, that was streetcars. So they looked so puzzled because they thought we've always had the motor coach buses. And then she would come home, and there was a corner store. And my brothers and I would have to go to the store and sit on the curb and wait until she get off the streetcar to help her bring the groceries home with those $3. And I always say to kids now, sometimes 2 or 3 streetcars passed and my mother wasn't on there. And so, but we had to sit there. We couldn't leave. And now we have cell phones. They call and tell you what streetcar I'm going to be on. But we didn't have cell phones back then. So we sat there until we saw her get off the streetcar and we helped her take the groceries home. But my brothers were so tired of being poor. Well, po really makes it sound better. And we, till they all dropped out of school and went into the military. And then they started sending those allotment checks home. So then I was able to continue school. And because of that, I am the only one out of 7 that finished high school, and the only one that went to college out of the 7. And one of the allotment checks was $30, and that's how much our rent was. So my mother and I were cool with the rent. We had the rent every month. And I started working at 13 years old. My mother would take me to work with her when she's ironing. I had to sweep the leaves off the front porch, down the steps, and all the way out to the street and take and get them up and put them in bags. And this was when I was 13. I also worked for an invalid who had moved down from Chicago because she had arthritis and her doctors in Chicago told she needed to come to a warmer climate. So I started working for her. I went up there, went to her house, which was 3 houses away, washed her face every morning, gave her the urinal, and then I went back and got dressed for school. I came back in the evenings and did the same thing and fixed her dinner. And then on Saturdays, I went up and changed her bed, gave her a sponge bath. And that went on for a number of years until I finished high school. So I started working early. And I'm happy I did because when all my friends who had fathers in the homes, when they were applying to colleges, and back then you didn't have a computer, so they typed the letters up and sent them to the schools. And they would be so happy when they get an acceptance letter back. And I couldn't rejoice during that time because I knew that when I finished high school, I had to look for a job. So I did find a job at a fluff dry laundry where I would put the clothes in the washer, take them out, put them in the dryer. Then when they come out of the dryer, I would fold them up and wrap them up in brown paper, put the name on them. People would come and pick them up. Well, I was already working as the seamstress of the community because I learned to sew by going down to Miss Thelma Patterson's house, and she taught me how to sew. And sometimes she would let me cut the pattern. Sometimes she would let me sew the dresses together, and I would be so happy. But she taught me to sew. Then I felt that I needed something more advanced. So while serving as a dressmaker in the neighborhood, making dresses for the people in the community, I went to trade school and took tailoring. At that time, what I did was, when I finished my tailoring, I got a job at a men's store doing alterations. So I worked there for 11 years as a tailor of men's clothing. While working as a tailor of men's clothing, I started taking college classes. And I would take a class that I would have to go on Mondays and Tuesdays or Mondays and Thursdays. I ended up getting my bachelor's degree. I ended up getting an associate degree in business administration. And then after moving to Detroit, I started working for the federal government. So all of my college education was obtained while working an 8-hour a day. And when I talk with kids and say that when I worked on my master's, I went Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. They say, you worked and went to school too? And I said, yes. And they couldn't understand that. So that is how I got my college education. So it was obtained. I have 3 degrees. They were obtained after working 8 hours a day. Most time my classes started at 6 in the evening and I had to drive to the place, grab some food on the way. But I'm so happy I worked and got my education in. And when I talk to kids, I tell them, you may not have money for a college education, but you still can get one because all you got to do is just want it. And my mother instilled in us that she wasn't able to get an education. She said, but if you stay in this house, you're going to school. So we knew how important education was to her. And any kid that I talk with, I always say to them things like, education pays the best interest. And it's very important that I stress education because I know how long it took me to get a college degree. But the most important thing is I was able to obtain it. And I know that I worked hard, but then that helped me feel, I felt much better knowing that I was able to get it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sands or Miss Lucy, for sharing that. Um, those not only a bit about yourself, but also some very important gems to share with our youth. And so we're going to pivot just a little bit and talk about your experience working alongside Dr. Martin Luther King. So, of course, on Monday we are celebrating the official holiday, his birthday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so it's for someone, funny enough, I have the last name King, and I get that all the time. Are you related to Dr. King? So for me, of course we're not, but for me it's more of a textbook, learning about it from another lens. But you were there in the movement, and so if you could just talk briefly about, what led you to want to work with Dr. King in the civil rights movement, what was it like? Um, and if you, again, feel free to share whatever you'd like related to that experience.
Okay, my first time meeting Dr. King was he came to Birmingham to speak, was the keynote speaker for Emancipation Day in Birmingham. And that was a big celebration for Emancipation Day. And he came and spoke at 16th Street Baptist Church. And he had sent a notice out to the churches that he wanted a mass choir. And everybody that was going to be in the choir rushed home and grabbed their robes and met at the church. And we didn't have these trucks now, and we had cars. So everybody who had a car met at my church, St. Luke AME Zion Church, and we met there and got in these cars and went down to 16th Street Baptist Church. And those that were singing in the choir, we had to be there early. So we got there and went inside the church. And had we not been singing in the choir, we would not have been able to get anywhere near that church because people had already started gathering and we had to go through the crowd to get in the church. And I should never forget that speech that night. He talked about a new day coming, and he said that, and the way he described it, he said that it was going to be something like you've never seen before. He said, there's going to be bloodshed, and we all looked around at each other in the choir. He said, and he equated it to a mother having a baby. He said, sometimes the mother passes away at childbirth. So there would be lives lost. And we really looked concerned then. But he was explaining this new movement that was coming. And I felt that he was really close to God because just the way he described it, there were lives lost and there was bloodshed uh, during the civil rights movement. And I should never forget because we continue to talk about that in the next maybe a month or two, he came back to Birmingham and started scheduling meetings. And we were having meetings at churches, and some of those churches were bombed because, that was our meeting places. But we in Alabama felt that it was time for a different movement because we had lived through this segregation all of our lives. And we didn't want the next generation and our children and grandchildren to come up in this same movement that we had been in all of our lives, with the colored and white signs at the water fountains and the colored and white signs at the restrooms. We didn't want that to happen with our children, but we didn't know how to go about it. But when he came back and scheduled meetings and set up demonstrations and sit-ins, then we were so happy about that, because then we were able to participate and get something accomplished. The first thing we did was the bus boycott in Birmingham. And most of us were on buses then. So we would just have to, somebody with a car would come by and pick you up and take you. But the people who lived in affluent areas, who had chauffeurs, maids, nurses, and gardeners, they went along with us on the bus. So maybe Dr. Jones' chauffeur would pick the maids and the butlers and the nurses up on the bus line one week, and the next week, the lawyer and let his chauffeur pick them up the next week. So they went in, the whites went in with us and did that. Then the next thing we did was the downtown merchants. Dr. King went down to talk with them, went to the Merchants Association meeting, and they wouldn't let him in. And he came back and told the group that they would not let him into the meeting. They talked and give his long list of demands about moving the colored and white signs on the buses and in the stores, over the restrooms and over the water fountains. And the water fountain for the colored was just plugged in, but the water fountain for the whites was into the plumbing, and their water was cold. And in the department stores, we would shop all over the store. And if we became hungry, we had to go downstairs to the hot dog stand and get a hot dog and stand up down there and eat. And it was next to the white men's restroom. And while you was down there, you got you some colored water. You went to the colored ladies' restroom. Then you went upstairs and finished shopping. Well, see, we were tired of that, but we didn't know how to get rid of it. But with Dr. King, he was really God sent, because when he came there and organized all these sit-ins and meetings, we were able to get that taken care of. But I mentioned that they would not let Dr. King come into the Merchants Association meeting. So we were in a meeting after that and had voted to do a boycott of all the stores in downtown Birmingham. And at the time we had, you call them security guards now, but at the time we called them watchmen. So the watchmen were outside the churches, sitting in cars with shotguns, because whites had come up at night when we were holding the meeting and threw bombs at the churches. So these two white guys came up because they heard that Dr. King was in a meeting. They were looking for him. This was after the boycott of the stores started, and they weren't making any money. So they came looking for Dr. King, and they learned that he was at this meeting at St. Luke AME Zion Church. And if you will imagine these two white men walking down the aisle, and the church was packed. They had put chairs in the aisles and down the sides of the windows, and it was just packed. And the two watchmen came in with that. They didn't have the shotguns drawn, but they had them with them. And they walked these two white guys in. And these two white guys came in, and Dr. King stood up and asked them what they wanted. And he said, one of them said, "We came to talk to you because we ain't making no money." He said, "Well, I came down to the meeting to come in to talk to you and tell you what our demands were. And you wouldn't let me in." He said, "Well, we ain't known you was out there. If I'd known you was out there, I'd have told them to let you in." He says, "Too late, we decided to boycott the downtown merchants." So they were able to walk back out very sad. Dr. King told them, "You go and talk with the city fathers and tell them that you're not going to be able to pay your taxes because you're not making any money." And that's when they changed the laws on the books. During that time, when I do presentations, I had this sign. Right. Can you see the colored sign?
I see it.
Can you see the white sign?
I see it.
This was on the buses. This was on the back of the seats on the bus. And we always sat behind the colored sign, and the whites sat in front of the sign. And Rosa Parks got on, and people were standing all back of the colored sign. There were no more seats back here. And there was one seat right in front of the white. Rosa Parks got on and sat next to the window. Another Black guy got on, and he sat on the aisle seat with Miss Parks. Well, all the white seats were filled. So when a white man got on and there was no seat for him, the driver stopped the bus and came back and said, "You got to give up this seat because this white man doesn't have a place to sit." And the Black man got up. Miss Parks remained seated by the window. So then we didn't have all that technology. So what the driver did was got to the next stop, got off the bus, went in the telephone booth and called the police. Police came and asked her to move, and she would not move. And they warned her that if you do not move, we are going to put you in jail. And she continued to sit there, and they arrested her. So that's what happened to Rosa Parks. Now you've heard other stories about it. And I'm writing a book on the civil rights movement. And the title of my book is "I Was There and Involved. So how can you tell me what happened?" I have heard I've heard so many different versions of that, but I know what happened.
Uh-huh.
I've heard that the white man beat her up and all, so you hear all those different stories, but you have just heard the original story. So that's how I met Dr. King. And then his office was in the Pythian Temple on 17th Street between 3rd and 4th Avenue. And I started volunteering in his office. And what we were doing was mostly opening large bags of mail that were coming from all over the United States and the world. And we would open those bags, and most times there were checks, mostly checks, and they were coming from everywhere. The largest donation that I saw was a cashier's check for $20,000.
Oh,
Then I have opened envelopes with $1 in it, $5 in it, and $10 in it. So at the time, it was so bad because they were bombing houses and churches. And President Kennedy was calling every day to get the status of what was going on. If he didn't call, Robert Kennedy would call and get the status. And of course, we didn't have all the technology. So I would answer the phone and I would go to Dr. King's office and say, pick up the phone. The president is on the phone. Robert Kennedy is on the phone. Little did I know that that would be history now. So those are the clerical duties that I perform. Some people said it was secretarial duties, but I know that I did a lot of different office work. But he had secretaries that he would bring with him sometimes. So some people call me a secretary, and some people say I worked in the office. But whatever it was called, I'm happy that I was able to be in his midst, somebody who was God sent to come down to the South to get us out of this thing that we had been in all of our lives. And I had spoken with friends of mine in the North, and they would say, oh, we don't have those problems up here. But when we started demonstrating in the South, it broke out all over the United States. I had two brothers in California, two in New York, and a sister in St. Louis. And they would call and say, what are you guys doing down there? Then later on, they looked at their situation and learned that they weren't so well off either. So that is how the civil rights, that is how I got to work. And each time he came to Birmingham, I went to his office and worked in his office. And I came from work. And on Saturdays, I worked in his office. So it was just a blessing to have been around him, that a person I felt was God sent, because we would still be in that situation, I think, if he had not come south and started the movement going. Well, the children, high school kids, they wanted to get involved. And their parents said, definitely not. You will get arrested and you are going to carry that record with you the rest of your life. Said, no, you're not. Dr. King met with the parents and persuaded them, encouraged them to please allow these kids to be a part of history. And they consented, and the kids got involved. Well, we didn't have but about 3 high schools at the time. And the kids walked out of the school and went to the other schools and milled around on the campus. And the ones in the school saw them out there and they got up and come out. At the time, we had all Black teachers. So the Black teacher said, I can't tell you to leave, but if it was me, I would get up and go. So that's all they needed to hear. And they got up and they came out and they moved on from one high school campus to the next. And when they all gathered enough, then they went downtown and started marching and up and down the streets. And several of them got put in jail and they took them to the jail. and had to process all of them, and they all came up with, some of them came up with fictitious names, and when they would call the names, somebody would touch the others, that's the name you gave. Then they say present, but they left them outside for a long time. The crowd was so large, and they were processing the crowd, and they left them out there, and it started to rain, and they started singing spirituals and made all the white police officers mad because that's all they had. They couldn't understand them being that happy, and here it is raining, and we out here having to process you, and we getting wet, and here you are singing spirituals. So then they decided to organize the marches. I worked on the committee, and these are the little bags that you used to sell peanuts in. We had donations of 5 articles: toothbrush, toothpaste, comb, uh, and there were 2 more. I'll think of them in a minute, but we put them in these little bags. And each kid, before they lined up to march downtown, they came by 16th Street Baptist Church. And it was soap, washcloth, toothbrush, toothpaste, and comb. Those were the 5 items we put in this little bag, and they all come by and picked up a bag. And the day that Bull Connor, the police commissioner, told the police to arrest all of them, they herded them in Ingram Park and called out the fire trucks and put the fire hoses on them and the dogs. And those fire hoses knocked these bags out of their hand. On the 6 o'clock news, you saw all those items strode all over Ingram Park. And people were asking me, what are those things on there? And I told them how we had packed these bags and gave them to them. So when you go to jail, these are the items you're going to need. But on the 6 o'clock news, they were all over that park where the fire hydrants had knocked them out of their hands. And we were able to see them get wet and everything, and we just felt terrible. But that was one of the most disgusting things. And people from all over the world called down there and talked about that and talked about how bad it looked. And from there, things really start changing.
Well, I'm definitely that was really powerful. There were 2 things that really stood out when you were sharing your story. First, um, in honor of the late Congressman John Lewis, the whole coined term good trouble. And so a lot of times when we think about, movements such as civil rights, indigenous rights, or other social political movements, we think of, when you say term good trouble, those that are marching and those that are being arrested. And while that is certainly good trouble because you're looking to affect change, you also brought up, the administrative side and the day-to-day tasks, because in essence, I feel like you kept the movement going and kept it organized and, helped, and you did your part. And so, and especially because you were working full time, and you would go after work. And so, one of the things that I took away from that is that, there's a role for everyone. Of course, there are those that are marching, but you also have those that donate to causes, those that, you know, every little bit helps, whether it's $20,000 cashier check or $1. But if you're looking to affect change, find that role that works for you and put it to good use. And then the other bit, which was very funny that you said that, was you were there. Because a lot of times, similar to what was said earlier, if I read about civil rights, it's through secondhand stories such as this, but also through, you know, history books, in social studies or, history, whatever class that is. And so a lot of times stories are whitewashed. Maybe that wasn't the best word, but, stories are revised, if you will, to make it more palatable, but we don't get the inside, about what really, really happened, and especially when it comes to the civil rights movement. So I really appreciate you for sharing that. And so, we subsequently know what happened. Um, the March on Washington, the March on Jobs and Economy, the I Had a Dream speech that was originally done in Detroit before it was done in Washington. Unfortunately, we know about the events that occurred with the assassination of Dr. King in 1968. And so, while we've certainly, but through that, we as Black people and people of color as a whole, and even America, we've seen some progress. We still have a long ways to go, but we've seen some progress leading up to the inauguration of our 44th president, President Barack Obama. And in 2 days, we will see the swearing in of our first woman and our first Black vice president, Kamala
Mhm.
Harris. And so definitely want to get your feedback on, where do you think we are as far as progress from the civil rights movement to the present?
I think we have made some progress, but I often think of what would have happened had Dr. King continued living. And I feel that he would have gone on with his dream and things would have been much better. If there had been a person when he left to step into his spot and continue the movement, I think, but somewhere in between there, we kind of dropped the ball and felt that we had arrived and there had been so much progress made. And I don't think most of us realized that there was still quite a bit left to do. So we kind of settled in with what had happened during his era. And I often wonder about that because he was, he had shared with us that he had met with Malcolm X. And I think he was trying to get, I feel, this is my opinion, he was trying to get Malcolm X to come over on the nonviolent side because that side uh, like the violent side, and they didn't like nonviolence at all. I mean, they kind of dogged out Dr. King for being nonviolent, and he had meetings with them, and then I had read an article that said that Malcolm X people realized that Dr. King was trying to change him over. So this is why I understand he was murdered. But I just feel that now that we have young people involved, like Black Lives Matter, I think that's a wonderful organization. And you have captured this younger generation. And this is the one this is the generation that we need to take it on. If we can keep the violence out and the peaceful demonstrations, I think we can take it uh, to the place where we all would like to be. But I think we're heading in that direction now.
Awesome. And one of the things too that I noted, and I'm glad you talked about Black Lives Matter and current social movements, because one of the things you joked about it earlier, but now technology. is really, really big. Back in the day when folks experienced police brutality, it was your word versus um, the brutalizer versus the one who experienced it. Um, Word. Now everyone has a cell phone, so we film movements. Um,
Right.
as far as organizing social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all these other social media platforms, the word gets out, email, um, very,
Right.
very fast. So it's really, really powerful, especially to see young people involved in social change, because a lot of times people assume that young folks are apathetic, or they're not as concerned, and if anything, young people are mad. They're getting out here and they're doing boots on the ground work. So it really kind of debunks that whole myth of passing the torch. Who's the next leader? What's the next cause? Who's going to take up, the next baton, excuse me, when it comes to change. So I really appreciate that. One of the things I noticed also in relation to the civil rights movement is the involvement of Black Greek letter organizations, or the Divine Nine. So,
Mhm.
of course, we had Dr. King. He was an Alpha. Um, Brother Abernathy was a member of a Greek letter organization. I believe he's a Sigma. I'm going to do my research and make sure that that's the case. We had Dr. Lowry, um, Dr. Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson. He's a member of Omega Psi Phi. Just so many individuals, and it wasn't just men. We had Fannie Lou Hamer, member of our sorority, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Of course, we had the late great Coretta Scott King, member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, along with Mrs. Rosa Parks. Had Pat Spencer from Zeta Phi Beta. Just so many people who got together, despite their colors and their letters, to unite with a single cause. And so, if you can talk, especially now that you're a member of Delta Sigma Theta, again, not speaking on behalf of the sorority, but just your thoughts on how we as members of Black Greek letter organizations um, can unite to affect change in our community.
I think that we are kind of leading the way now. So this is really good, and I'm just happy to see all the Greeks working together. So for a number of years, they say that we as a race couldn't work together, but I see that all the Greeks are working together, and I'm very happy about that. And so I think that each organization is doing their part through their organization. But at the end, we all come together for the same cause. And I really like that. So I think we're going to be successful because uh, we all have picked up the torch from our immediate organization and all met in the middle for the same cause. I think it's going to work.
Awesome, thank you. And I just want to go on the record. I did do my research. Reverend Abernathy is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. So, to my Kappa Nuke friends, charge it to my head and not my heart. And Brother Hosea Williams is a member of Phi Beta Sigma. So, I definitely want to put that out there. And then also, even looking at the creation of Iota Phi Theta, um, occurred around the time the civil rights movement was going on. So definitely want to acknowledge them and the brothers of that fraternity. And so we've also seen recently, the importance of how Black Greek letter organizations or Divine Nine NPHC organizations, what working together looks like recently. Vice President elect Kamala Harris is a member of a Divine Nine organization, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority
Right.
Incorporated, and you saw this Herculean joint effort to make sure that she was inducted, or excuse me, elected to that position. And so, definitely, us as members of organizations, again, despite our colors and despite our letters, our goal is to uplift our community and to make it better than what we know it to be. So,
Mhm.
definitely want to put that out there. And are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share, Miss
One I
Lucy?
would like to one thing I would like to go on the record is that all white people are not bad, and there were it was it was the bombing of 16th Street Baptist Church, and the little girls was killed after Sunday school. I knew one of the girls because she was a friend of my niece, but after that incident, seemingly all the whites just did an about turn and come back toward us. And they said that was totally ridiculous. And they all start helping people of color. When I said helping, they were telling their help, don't go in. If I can stay out of the downtown stores for you, you should be able to stay out of there for yourself. Don't go in there and buy anything. And as I mentioned, the bus boycott, they organized and had their maids and their butlers picked up on the bus lines, uh, you know, and everybody just tuned in. And I got a section in my book that I'm writing that I call Supportive Whites. They were really supportive. They started really working along with us. We would have accomplished our goal, but I'm thinking it would have taken a little longer. But when they joined in, then we were able to go down that long list that Dr. King had made, that you need to do everything on this list to say that you have helped us or you have gone along with our desires. And let me just touch on voting. All we had to deal with, all we had to bargain with was the Black vote. So when you got 18 in Alabama, you went right away and registered to vote. It wasn't like, I don't know how I'm going to get downtown to it, to the place where I need to go, or I don't know, you know, you don't come up with no excuses. When you got 18, you went and registered to vote. And at my age, I have never missed a major election since I became 18. And I stress that because we had to pay poll tax. Everybody, now people say, well, it wasn't but $2, but $2 back then was like $20. And we shouldn't have had to pay anything. But even that, I feel when you say about vote, when you talk about voting, oh, I just go off the deep. I said, look, please go and vote. Do you need a trip? Do you need transportation? Do you need somebody to take you down? Anything you need, let me know. I will take you wherever you need to go to register to vote. Because that's all we had to bargain with was the Black vote. And we would send a delegation out about 2 weeks before the election to meet with the candidates. Now, all of them was white at that time. So we knew that none of them was really for us, but we had to choose the lesser of the evil and say, if you do this, this, and this, then we will throw all of our votes So we didn't have anything to bargain with but the black vote. If you do this, we will throw all of our votes toward you. And we were able to get things accomplished by just bargaining like that. And then they would come back, we'd have a meeting before we go to vote. And we would mark our ballots because at that time, you couldn't even talk to each other in line because there was a white police officer standing over there that was watching every move you made. And he was thinking, would have thought that you were trying to sway somebody's vote. We could not, we had to get in the ballot box and then pull the curtain and then take out our marked ballots. That's how bad it was. But we had to pay that $2 poll tax. But we were able to get enough votes and enough people paying poll tax, enough people registering to vote to accomplish most of our goals. So I go out talking about voting. I said, please go to vote. And since I've been in Detroit, and I came here in '68, I came here to be married. I had no idea about leaving Alabama. And I met a guy down there who was on vacation, and he worked at Chrysler, and I was driving a Chrysler, and the rest is history. So that's how I got to Detroit. but but I talk about voting everywhere I go, and doing the doing the voting season when we are voting for anything. I said, well, let me know if you need a ride. Let me know if you need anything. I will get you to the place you need to be. And I just enjoy it because that's a given right. And in the rural area of Alabama, down so many miles from Montgomery, and not major cities like Montgomery, but the smaller places down below there, the rural areas. I understand that some people be trying to walk to town to register, and they would be cut off, and then people become violent toward them when they say they were going downtown to register. So see, people took all of that just to get to the ballot box. And it is so important. And I say to people, anytime you need me to come and talk about voting, please let me know. I don't care how my schedule is, I will work it in. You see
Well,
how
I'm, no,
voting is my thing. You want to know about voting, talk to me.
will do, and I'm gonna send some folks your way, especially
Okay.
because in Michigan, there's no excuse. You get we can't call it early voting, but you can vote, at satellite locations in the city of Detroit. You know, same day voting, um, no excuse absentee ballot. Uh, even I know you talked a lot about poll tax, but what's happening now is, there's concerns about voter. I use that in air quotes, voter fraud, but like no one's showing ID. You don't even have to show an ID. You just sign an affidavit. Of course, you do it under penalty of perjury, but you sign it saying, "Hey, I'm here. I'm me. I want to vote." So there's really, the polls are open all day. There's no excuse for someone to not exercise their right. Even if you choose not to vote, I mean, I don't know why, but that is your prerogative. But then you can't complain if you don't vote. So I'm glad, and I've heard stories about you picking, you're fearless. You see some young men out saying, hey, this is what's going on. You need to be there. Next thing you know, they're in your car, um, getting from point A to point B. So we need more people like you in the village, village in the community doing the work. This has been an absolute honor. Sands, I love you so much. I love
Oh,
you
I love
so,
you.
so
I love.
much. I am so honored to be in this space with you and to hear firsthand, because like you said, you were there firsthand on, what the civil rights movement was like, um, where it started versus where we are now, some things that we can do um, to improve, the life and livelihood of people of color, in particular Black people, our community. This has been so enjoyable. I really really enjoyed this. Really really enjoyed this. And again, thank you so much. You've been so gracious and so beautiful, and your stories are captivating. I look forward to your book. So as soon as it's done, just let me know. I am posting it. I'm buying a copy. I want a signed copy too. But I'm excited. I'm excited, and I'm
Been
very
working.
appreciative.
You are very welcome, and my pleasure. And I have been working on the book, but I'm so involved with the community because I feel that the community is where we live, so you should be involved with it. So I end up working so much. I sit on 3 boards: Fair Housing Center, NAACP, Repertory Theater, and I just enjoy. I'm a people person. I just enjoy doing those things, but I have promised myself this year I'm gonna get it because I have little things in there like we weren't winning our cases in Birmingham. We went to
Mhm.
court during the civil rights movement, and Dr. King had attorney Constance Motley from New York to
Yeah.
come down there and and go to court with us. So we started winning our cases then. And it was in the Birmingham News on the first page. Back during then, I was just moving so much. I didn't have any clippings, and I didn't save any clippings, anything out of the newspaper. So what you hear is all in my head. So at this age, that's not a safe place for it to be.
Ah,
so so I'm gonna have to hurry and pull it out and put it in the book. But it was on the front page of the Birmingham News where this judge in the courtroom got so familiar with attorney Constance Motley, he started calling her by her first name. He kept saying Constance this and she stopped him and said, "Judge, Your Honor, my first name is reserved for my relatives and my friends, and you are neither one." Now that
okay.
was on the. Now see, if I had been into it, I would have got that off the front page of the Birmingham News way back when. But it has been a pleasure. I'm so happy, and in lieu of time, there's so many things I did not tell, but we had a lot of support from whites, and I just like I said, I'm giving them their props in my book because I call them supportive whites, and they stepped up to help us. And I'm grateful to God that I was able to work all day and go to school in the evening to get my college education. And I tell kids now it can be done. And we didn't have grants back then. We didn't have loans back then. So I say that you can do it. And they said, "But how did you do it?" I said, "Just got up every morning and went to work and left work and went right on to school."
Well,
And
thank
I stress that.
Well, thank you so much. You are the epitome of good trouble. You are a role model. Of course, you're my saying, so I love you regardless. But you are a role model to so many. Funny enough, our immediate past NPHC rep or president rather, is your nephew Michael. So he and I have talked, glowingly about you as well. But you are such a I know you talked about Dr. King being a godsend, but you really are. And thank you so much for your work throughout the years and all that you've done to improve the lives of Black people. So I thank you so much, and thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. And so,
It was my pleasure. I'm just so happy you asked me.
thank you, thank you. And so, with that being said, again, thank you to all who are viewing this interview. We much appreciated. And while we wish you a, happy MLK Day, always remember the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and of course, freedom is not free. And so, we as individuals, we as members of Divine Nine organizations, the NPHC, um, that we're always constantly looking to make sure that we improve the lives of our community and that we're always making sure that we're effective agents of change. With that, I bid you adieu. Good night. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or concerns, if you want to learn more about Miss Lucy, which is the best way to reach you? What is the best way to reach you?
They can text me or call me. I'm cool anytime.
Okay. All right. And Miss Lucy is funny too. She is a, I love her. I just love her. And so I'll make sure that for those who are interested in reaching out to Miss Lucy, who is cool anytime, that you have her contact information as well. Also, you can check us out on our social media. If you're on Instagram, we are NPHC underscore 313. If you're on Facebook, you can find us via our Facebook page at National Panhellenic Council, Metro Detroit. Again, with that being said, I bid you adieu, good evening, and wish you a safe, be safe, mask up, and sanitize down because that is the times that we're living in.
I'm
Thank you.
scheduled for my vaccine on Tuesday.
Oh, okay, okay. I need to get on that.